Hello and welcome to the Pivot Leadership Podcast. We're here to explore the intricacies of leadership, explore the science behind it, and hopefully learn a few things along the way. I developed the Pivot framework to help change work environments for the better. Pivot uses neurological science to help leaders understand their colleagues and analyse their own feelings and responses. All in all, we aim to enhance mental well-being, improve performance, and benefit everyone involved. So what does pivot mean? To pivot, you need perseverance, inclusion, value, optimization, and trust. With my guests, we'll unpick these principles and discuss how each one is vital in building strong leaders. On today's episode, we're looking at value. We'll discuss the dynamics and attributes behind leadership and how it's crucial to organisational excellence. One of the best ways to understand leadership is to connect it to value creation. Today's guest has epitomised the integration of value into every aspect of his career, from serving in the military and working in the private security sector to founding PestGone Environmental, his very own award-winning pest control and environmental service run by the military veterans. He's also participated in the TV show The Apprentice in 2023 and brings a unique perspective of value creation in a highly competitive environment. So without further ado, I'm delighted to welcome Mark Moseley to the show. Hello, Mark.
Hey, Emma. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
I'm really grateful that you've come on. I've been really looking forward to this conversation with you, talking about value creation. So before we get started, could you just tell the audience a little bit about you and your journey so far in your career, in your leadership roles, and the value that you feel like you've brought on that journey?
So my name's Mark Moseley. I am the founder of a pest control company based in London called PestGone Environmental. I am the best-selling author of the book Pests, and I appeared on the BBC British business show called The Apprentice. And I believe I've brought value to all of them roles.
Tell us about the journey, Mark, because your journey is so interesting. You know, let me tell the audience how we met. We were on an entrepreneur program together. We were in an action group together where we had to do lots of kind of experimental learning around entrepreneurship. And I got to learn a bit about you there and found you super interesting because your career wasn't actually in this to start with. Where did you start? Tell us about that.
So I joined the British military at the age of 16. I didn't want to go to university. I'd had enough of school, if I'm honest with you. I did okay in my GCSEs. I got A's and B's, and it got to the point of going to college like every one of my friends, and I thought I want to get out there in the workplace. And there was an opportunity to join the military, and so I joined the army at 16. And I had an amazing 9 years of travelling around the world, meeting some of the most coolest people, seeing some of the most beautiful places in the world, as well as some not so nice places. And then after 9 years, I left that and then went backpacking, as they call, to go and find yourself for 2 years. And then I did my 2 years backpacking, and then I fell straight back into basically going back into the military in a security course. And so worked out in the Middle East for 5 years in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, Lebanon, Israel, Jordan. And I loved it. And it was 8 weeks on, 2 weeks off. And I just sort of got to travel the world on my weeks off. I just pick a place in the world and travel. And then after that, I came back and I started a pest control company of all things in London. I thought it just aligned with everything, you know, my hero journey of trying to help people out when in the military, and then, you know, hearts and minds in Afghanistan when working in security. And then I thought, well, I don't mind doing a dirty job, so I'll just go into the pest control sector. And that's how it's been for the last 7-8 years. And then obviously we met on Dan Priestley's Key Person of Influence. And I know Daniel was on Stephen Bartlett's podcast, which was fantastic, and a fantastic episode for anyone to listen to.
Yes, it really, really was, wasn't it? And then, you know, he really talked a lot about the neuroscience. So the stuff that I kind of teach on my programs as well. But I loved his when he was talking about the reptile brain and the visionary brain. And that really kind of linked to the value creation module that we do on the program, because leaders demonstrating value through their leadership is actually quite a new concept for corporates. So, you know, that they don't actually think about the mountain of value they stand on, like Daniel taught us, and then how they can communicate that in a way that's impactful, storytelling, brings people on a journey, is visionary. So you've had lots of layers of leadership. You were in the military, which is a huge corporation in itself, if you like. Yeah. And there would have been lots of leadership examples in there. What really stood out for you about great leadership there? Can you just tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, I always found that in the military, it's quite a bossy environment. I think it has changed in the last sort of 15 years since I was in, but it certainly was a very hard environment, very harsh environment in more ways than one. And I always found that if you had a leader who would shout at you and say, right, Moseley, get your ass over there and go and do that, immediately I've lost all respect for that person because they're just telling me what to do. And so in my career, when I became a bit more up the ranks in the army, I thought, I'm not going to have a go at people and demand them to do something. I'm just going to say to them, yeah, you wouldn't mind going and do that, would you? And if they ever said no, I might sort of be more forceful. But at all them times, no one ever said no. And it actually got marked on one of my confidential reports. Moseley has a unique way of getting people to do things for him. He'd rather ask them than tell them, and it seems to be working. So that's how I've always tried to follow that through in my civilian life, if you like. And don't be too, bossy, if you like, but try and, treat people as human beings. And it seems to go a lot more along the lines of getting more respect from your staff. It's not always the case because some people step out of line, but if you start off on that level playing field with your staff, then it goes a long way in respect.
Yeah, I really like that. And it's that human element to your leadership. You're very authentic. You always are. I've always found that when I work with you. So I can really see how that does actually play out. And in terms of your value, then you're bringing those valuable skills to other people, and that the values in the relationship, isn't it? And how you're building those relationships.
I think when in the military, you're sort of taught the core values and standards. And in there, you've got, integrity. And I think that's a big part to play. You want to go and do the best job for someone. So if I'm going out to do a pest control job and I'm sending my staff to do it, I want them to do the best job. So I've got to make sure that they're integral. They've got respect for the customer when they're turning up. So they put their shoe covers on. They're not walking through the house in dirty boots. And there's discipline there again. So they turn up on time. So that's something that, again, I've tried to pass on from the military world into the civilian world. And it all just aligns. Like if I turn up 10 minutes late for something, I start sweating. If I'm turning up 10 minutes late for a job, I'm panicking. But, I found in the civilian world that certainly technicians that work for me, they would leave it right to the last minute. If their job sort of has an hour sort of to get there between 8 in the morning and 9 in the morning, they will get there bang on at 9 in the morning. Whereas myself, I will get there bang on at 8 because it just aligns with everything, the discipline side of things. So there's a lot of crossover from the military world into the civilian world.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool because they're strong neural pathways that you formed through repetition in that environment, high performing environment. And that's really kind of set with you. And then you've brought that high performance of value into your disciplines in your work. How does that impact on your team? Are you kind of helping them kind of take on some of those disciplines?
Yeah, I mean, that was probably the biggest challenge of when we started taking on employees. In any career, any employer will say when they go from being a one-person company into a 5, you are going to get something called skill fade. What you do and what the guys do, there's going to be a skill fade there, and you're going to get a little bit upset because they're not following the same processes that you're doing. And it was quite a challenge trying to instill in the staff these professional protocols, such as wear disposable gloves when you go in, put your shoe covers on. Immediately, it's sending a subliminal message to the customer. This person is professional. They're coming in and, it's all sort of aligned. But when I see other companies turning up, no shoe covers, they're wearing Reebok Classics, their big toes sticking through the Reebok Classics, they've not got a torch, they're just ripping the kitchen apart to try and find the mice. And you think it all just comes down to being professional. If you look professional, there's a good chance you are professional. And that was the hardest thing for myself when I sort of started bringing on employees. I mean, I wrote the employee handbook. It's just all about protocols. When you walk up to a person's house, you should be looking for A, B, C, D. As soon as they open the door, you sort of say a nice courtesy to them, and then you put your shoe covers on, put disposable gloves on. I mean, it's an idiot's guide of what you should do, because it just got so frustrating for me when I'd hear stories of a customer saying, your technician's done this. And I'll be like, it's there, it's in the handbook, you can't be doing this. So I don't want to sound like a bit of a, too much pedantic and nitpicky, but it's just one of these things that I want to try and be professional, and that's value creation. You're passing the value on to the customer to do a good job for them.
Oh, absolutely. It's like the golden thread that runs through any organization, isn't it? And I think that's actually what you just said there about that skill fade. I find that really interesting. And that's something that new leaders in particular with less experience about understanding that when they first go into a leadership role, when they're trying to implement things, actually that is a process that could happen and is a pitfall. So I think that would be really helpful for leaders to take that on, new leaders to take that on. That's great. So in thinking about your company then and the transition from the military into your company, in value creation, I talk a lot about mindset, and mindset's everything. Tell me about the mindset through that transition, because that's a piece of change that you had to go through. And we know that change impacts on our mindset. So talk to me about how you managed that, any kind of experiences you had, both positive and negative with that. That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, I always think that, I don't know, there's this big thing about people having ideas and then starting businesses. And wasn't really that for me. It was more of a necessity. It's like any of us. We all want to, get some money in, and we've got to do something as quick as possible to try and pay our bills. And I basically fell into the situation of where I didn't want to do what I'd been doing in the security world. So a friend of mine suggested starting a pest control company, and that was it. It was just an idea, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And then I realised there's a bit of money to be earned, and I don't want to sound like a money grabber, but I thought there's a lot of money to be earned in this industry. I think I'm professional. I speak the same language as people. I know exactly what to do. It's not a difficult job. So that was it. So everything from my mindset of being in the military, sort of coming into the civilian world, I think it was resilience. That was the biggest thing, because there's a lot of people out there who will start something as a bit of a fad, and then they give up after about 6 months. And I always say 1,000 days. You've got to give something 1,000 days. If after 1,000 days you can see that you're getting repeat business, you are starting to make a bit of profit, then you're onto something. If after 1,000 days there's not a need for your whatever it is, services or products, then maybe look to do something else. But you've got to give it that 1,000 days, because there's so many people who do less than a year and go, oh, I'm going to go on to the next thing. I'm going to go on to the next thing. But the military teaches you resilience, resilience, resilience. You've just got to keep going. And that's exactly what I instilled in this. And when times were hard and the money wasn't coming in, I thought, no, there's a need for this. just going to keep going. And then after 5 years, you start seeing the benefits. Then you think, yes, the numbers start going in this trajectory that you want. You think, thank God for that. It was all worth it.
Yeah. And Lisa's taking on new services and roles. It's exactly the same model, isn't it? So, the mindset is value creation mindset. I'm bringing my value to this role, implementing it. And you're saying for 1,000 days with resilience. So perseverance is the first class that we do on the leadership models. And without resilience, you don't have perseverance. So it's making sure you've got those skills and that mindset. And then you're talking about there, the abundance side of things, like that was an easy transition for you. You knew there was an opportunity. You didn't have any kind of mind management around that. You could see it and you went for it. And then the collaboration piece by building your team, I think, is a really cool way of leaders really thinking about, when I take on a new adventure or a new opportunity, like these are the principles that I need to have right up front, ready to go to make it a success. That's neat.
Well, I was in my time off, I go and climb mountains as well. And I sort of try and sort of align that. I go and climb mountains because I don't get any phone signal whatsoever when you're halfway up a mountain. You might get Wi-Fi at the halfway lodge and people might try and make a few WhatsApp calls, but it's the best place where I get away from the world. Every year I do this at least once a year for a couple of weeks, go and climb mountains and just get away from the world, no phone signal. And that's when you start getting ideas as well. But then I sort of think in the same sort of breath, it's the climbing that mountain, because it is bloody hard, some of them, under the final day when you're trying to reach the top of the summit for the sunrise, and people are just dropping off. It's just people going, no, I'm not even bothering. I'm staying in bed. And that's, I always think, like business leaders, is like climbing that mountains. And I don't want to sound too pompous or anything, but it is. And you just keep going. I thought, well, in the military, I've always been that way. Climbing the mountains, I will always make sure that I always get to the top. And that's the same as the business. It's just having that stubborn relentlessness to keep going through the shit times, and then just basically seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and starting to actually see the fruits you labour with a bit of money coming in. That's it. But that's where, 99.9% of the people, they just drop off from climbing that mountain. So as long as you can be that 0.1%.
Yeah. So tell us about your book. You've got a best-selling book that links to your business and what you do. Tell us about that, because it's super exciting.
Yeah, so I'd actually started writing a little bit of an autobiography in the years I was working away in the Middle East. And I thought, we were on the same course, Emma, as we know. And then on the course, they say you should write a book because that's the best business card that you will ever have. And I use it all the time. I go into tender meetings now, and I know I'm down to the last 3 companies. And I always leave a couple of books as the last thing. I pull them out of my little bag and go, here's a couple of books about pest control. And straight away, people are thinking, Jesus, this guy's written a book on it. We'll have him to use it. We won't go for the big companies. So the book was solely to be the best business card out there for my industry. I don't know many other people who've got a pest control book out there, and it's won me quite a lot of work. And the book's not there to make me money. I actually had a royalty payment the other day, which was quite nice. And I thought, I've done all right with some of these book sales, but it's more to actually be just the best business card for me. And I can tell you now, this book is in the homes of royalty. It's in the homes of celebrities, because I just leave it when I decide, I left, give it to a celebrity about 3 weeks ago and said, can I just leave this? And he signed it and he was like, oh, thanks very much. And I thought, blimey, he's a national name. So yes, that's the long-winded answer. But yeah, it's just to act as the best business card that anyone can ever have. So my advice would be, if you get the opportunity, write a book, and it brings in so much more work because you're the authority in that industry.
Yeah. I find this fascinating because in the value class, I've got like a 5I model for influence, and we talk about using our value to influence. So it's more of an attraction and a value creation type of way of influencing, rather than the old command and control influencing styles that we used to use. So it's all about attraction, drawing people to work with you rather than you having to push people to work with you or force them to work with you. In that 5Is, the first one is impact. So have an impact when you're speaking, but the second one quickly comes up with information about you, and have you got that in some kind of literature for leaders? And leaders are a bit like, oh, that's not part of my role, but actually what I try and teach them is, you can give any presentation, but there's going to be some people in the room who are going to need that extra level of influence, and they do that through information and authority. So having some kind of PDF or document or a slide deck or something is super, super powerful. And you've just talked about how you're, going into these tenders, giving your presentation or answering the questions that they want, and then just dropping a bit of information down, which is your really cool book, by the way. I'm not minimizing that. It's a cool, super book. But actually what that does neurologically to other people in terms of influence and impact is driving success for you. And I think leaders have got a lot to learn in this space.
I agree. Yeah, without a doubt. I mean, yeah, I think there's some leaders who will try and shy away from certain, being in the public eye, or being not in the public eye, but being in the company eye, if you like. They'll sort of, yes, I'm in charge of a team, but I don't want to be sort of so out there that people start thinking things of me. And no one thinks that of you if you're the leader. I promise you, it's just all in your own head. So yes, if you can try and be a leader and try and be, an authority in that sort of sector or industry that you're in, such as writing a book or putting, information. I know there's a lot of newsletters that go out, but doing something to sort of give that value creation to the team as a newsletter, or I don't know, it could be something such as the industry quiz every month or something down the pub. I don't know. I'm trying to think of something that's quite cool for people to do, but there's a lot of leaders I've seen that try and shy away. They've got the name as a leader, but they don't want to be in the company eye, if you like.
Yeah. So that's really helpful. I want to touch on The Apprentice if I can.
Of course, yeah. Everyone loves The Apprentice.
Tell me about the whole mindset and thought process around applying for that, then the process of being part of that process and the experience of that, and what you kind of went through and what you were bringing with your value to that process.
I've never seen the show too much before in the past. I knew of it. I didn't realise how big it was, but I just happened to be injured from a football game the week previously. I sat home on a Thursday night and watched an episode. And like we all do, we go, these lot are bloody stupid. So I thought, right, I'm going to apply for it. And that weekend I went down and went through the interview stages. And I actually used a bit from the key person of influence. I was sat in front of Lord Sugars, one of his business aides, and I was sat in front of the head exec of the TV company. So there's two people now, and I'm up so many levels in this big building throughout the day. And they said, right then, why should you be on the show? And I said, if you think of a company such as Tesla, who do you think of? And the chief exec went, Elon Musk. And I pointed to Lord Sugar's aide and I said, if you think of a company, Amazon, who do you think of? And he went, Jeff Bezos. And I went, well, when you think of pest control, you're going to think of Mark Moseley. And they both laughed and they went, up you go. So that was it. I went outside with this runner, as they're called. They collected me. I got in the lift and I went straight up to the final stage where you have the camera shoved in your face. And I was just going to be a bit of a character and things. But that was the bit I learned on the key person of influence. You've got to be that authority in the figure. If you can be a figurehead for that industry and be a face for it, people buy into people more rather than they buy into companies. As we know, I think few people speak about football teams, professional football teams, they might have 1 million followers, but the leading striker for that football team will have 10 million followers, with people buying to people, such as, in businesses. And then when I got on the show, it was, quite daunting, as you can appreciate. There was lots of arguing, even behind the scenes it was crazy, some of the things that were happening. But I don't want to sort of do a disservice to the show, but it wasn't, as we all see it, it's not really business acumen that's needed. It's trying to create a lot of car crash TV moments. But that's what I thought I'd bring to the show after I saw the way it was going. I thought I'd just bring as much humour, because when someone got fired, there was a lot of, down, sad people. So I just tried to bring as much humour as possible to the show. And that was my value that I thought I would do. And there was a lot of laughs in the boardroom. I came up with a few witty jokes that they kept cutting out in the boardroom, but there was more laughs in the boardroom than a lot of more arguing. So it was good fun. But yes, there's many, many stories that I probably shouldn't say about the Apprentice that went on, because I'd get in trouble. But it was all good fun.
Tell me about what it's done for your leadership, though.
For my leadership, straight away doors started opening. I thought when the show was airing, I was thinking, oh my God, I look like an idiot. This is going to go down really bad. But thankfully, the public are quite fickle and they forget things very quickly. And then people are reaching out to me. Can I sit on an advisory board for like the military, getting military guys or girls when they come out of the military into workplace? So I now sit on an advisory board for that. I've been asked to do talks all around the country and business talks. And you're seen as this authentic business leader now. And I'm sat there thinking, well, I'm just a pest controller who was on a business show. And then after the talks, I'll give my books out. And then people are messaging me days later. I love what you said. Can you give me a bit of advice on this? And I'm thinking, God, I'm seen as a bit of a guru here. And I'm just a pest controller from Southeast London, Peckham. And now I'm being asked to do all this, which is quite nice. And I've only just learned from, like we all have on courses and everything else. And then you implement these things from what you learn on courses into your business. And when you see it works, you think, all right, so I'll just pass that or pay it forward, if you like. So there's nothing that I'm doing to reinvent the wheel. I'm just passing on the messages from successful people that have taught me these things. So that's about it, really.
I think that, you're quite humble in your approach there, but actually you are a value creation leader. Even if you're paying things forward, that's bringing value from other environments and paying it forward in another environment, people who might not have access to that, which is an ultimate pivot leader, I would say. Mark, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. You've been awesome and given me some really great insights into you further, and you've helped the audience for sure. Those in leadership really thinking about, I need to get over my own brain barrier to change. If I'm struggling with change, I need to kind of step into that and embrace it, bring my value, be diverse in what I'm doing in my career. And you've given us some great kind of tools there, actually, for people to implement when going through those things. So thank you so much. Can you tell the audience where they can look you up and find out more about you?
They can look me up on Instagram, Mark__Moseley, or they can find me on LinkedIn, Mark Moseley, and then PestGone. But yes, to any of your listeners, all I would say, if you're starting a business, just try and be brave and have that courage to put yourself out there. I know it's awful trying to do these YouTube videos or, Instagram reels or whatever you've got to do. But as soon as I started putting videos on YouTube about pest control, I think one's got over 35,000 views now about moths. And if we don't get a call about moths, we're going into a 7th floor embassy on Monday. And it was all found because of a YouTube video. And so try and be brave and put yourself out there to any of the listeners. That's my advice.
Awesome. And we'll put your book in the show notes for sure.
Thank you, Emma. I appreciate it.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Pivot Leadership Podcast. For any information on anything we've discussed in this episode, head down to the show notes. You'll also find my pivot scorecard there, so you can take the test and see what your pivot score is right now. Don't forget to like, rate and share the podcast and subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes.